Captain Gravel Yellowteeth Kagkapan threw the bottle of liquor he was sipping from across the room as he watched the single patrol vessel execute a textbook roll at the exact wrong moment, spreading a clean hit across multiple isolated sections of armor. He roared at the crew on his bridge, a mouth full of other sentient teeth. "I said to kill the bitch, not tickle her cunt!" "Sir, it's not our fault. Whoever's their pilot and engineer are doing things that..." There was a snap as Kagkapan drew a laser pistol and dropped the uppity ensign with a clean headshot. "Get that mewling little shit off of my bridge," he commanded. "Throw her corpse to the cooks so the slaves can get some meat, and get someone to replace her. Now where are our fighters? They're supposed to be done with the stupid little station and coming to flank her." The lady at communications looked up worriedly as the previous person to deliver bad news was just executed before her. Sir? We're reading that we're down to, 5? No, 4, out of 20? Yellowteeth roared. Yes, sir. How could a single interceptor kill 16 enemy craft which ambushed them? Did the bitch in blue somehow slip an extra wing inside their cunts to spring out and fight? Gravel growled, glaring at the sensor readout. He dragged over in front of him, as if it would give up its secrets through sheer might of anger. "Never mind that. Get me..." "Sir," the radio tech called out, "we've got something coming up. The patrol carrier is broadcasting on open channels." "What now?" Rochelle glanced at the sensor and engineering readouts in front of her and mentally frowned. Externally, her face was as stony smooth as ever, but internally she allowed herself a moment of annoyance. Armor was holding, but only just. There was the beginnings of a firefight blooming in the merchant convoy she was trying to escort. The two enemy ships continued to fire at her vessel, and an early hit had tripped a breaker setting lights all across the ship to boarding action red. She hoped the handful of night crew on her crew were able to find their filtered goggles before going nearly blind, due to their difficulties perceiving that wavelength. There was a silent impact as a lance of laser impacted the ship, and something flashed across her brain. An idea. "Comms, open me a line to the fleet. Open broadcast," the captain politely ordered the replacement officer, sitting at the radio station. The previous woman had rolled wrong with an impact and given herself a concussion, so the radio equipment was spattered with a not inconsiderable amount of rapidly hardening blue blood. "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied quickly and efficiently. "Line is open in 5, 4, 3... She finished the countdown with a raised hand. Rochelle took a breath in and began a speech she had practiced before, handed to her at the will of another. One of the many ways the Empress on Tshirt was able to influence the far-flung stretches of the Imperium were the women and men making up the ranks of the Imperial Heralds, male women tasked with carrying messages from the throne on Tshirt to the furthest periphery postings rapidly, safely and securely if the need arises. Packages delivered by this agency were, in many cases, some of the only times someone might hear the voice of the Empress outside of occasional holiday packages that always seemed to arrive late. However, one of the duties the Imperial Heralds were tasked to perform were rarely as satisfying. Delivering orders of execution. "I am Captain Rochelle of the ship Into Harm's Way, broadcasting on all channels the words of your Empress." She spoke her words with an easy cadence. It was a necessity to remain calm, remain steady. Everything of this had to be perfect. In her youth, Rochelle was fascinated with theatre, sitting for hours and days in front of her holoscreen, watching the newest performances. From Shirt's concert halls and grand open-air galas, to bootlegs of Sevastovan mystery theatre performances, of the great comedies and satire she couldn't get enough. As a young woman, she even took to the stage of these mystery theatres, allowing the full face masks and head coverings, worn by performer and audience, to hide herself and keep her future officer career intact, as she mocked the Empress to all shillkind, to a roaring applause. These performances gave her a flair for the dramatic, and experience with theatrical timing that she found more and more useful the longer she stayed in the Imperial Naval Service. Knowing how to pace yourself while speaking gave you an edge over competitors. A dry comment at another's deficiencies, or a plan's flaws, stuck more than kilograms of statistics, and being able to hide what you think behind a chosen mask was crucial when keeping order under fire. A sailor fights their hardest when their captain seems mildly annoyed at the fact enemies still exist to shoot at her. Admirals inspire most courage and valor when she stood in perfect stillness, scanning through reports and giving clear, concise orders. The goal was the mask, and if the mask was good enough, a captain or admiral could find herself embracing it, chasing away fear and doubt under that most artifice of covering. Hear me, O servants of my Imperium! Hear me and obey! The pirate scum known as Gravel Kagkapan, also known as Yellowtooth, for his disgusting habit of stealing the teeth of my just and good subjects, has been declared deceased. As such, I so declare this scum is to be chased to the end of the void, put up against a wall and shot without mercy. Any whom performs these actions shall do so within my grace and forgiveness of deeds that must have been done to complete these actions. Rochelle spoke. She pitched her voice slightly, mimicking the cadence and rhythm of the audio recording she had received from the hands of an Imperial herald. These have been the words of your Empress. It matters not that you have become outlaws against her will, nor that you have hounded her shipping. You are shill, and her words still hold sway over you. A full pardon will be given to any who kill the so-called Captain Kagkapan, or aid in his death. Rochelle paused. 1, 2, 3. This message will repeat until Captain Kagkapan is in custody of Imperial forces or lies dead. There, that should do it, Rochelle mused, nodding to her radio woman before giving out a precise set of orders. The pistol in Captain Yellowtooth's hand smoked. 2 women lay dead on the floor. Blood stained the silent bridge. One had drawn a knife the moment that bitch Rochelle started speaking, and his beloved, sweet, utterly dumb as a bag of rocks primary whore had jumped onto the blade in order to save her beloved husband. Gravel had just put a high-powered laser blast through the 2 of them, as blue blood stained the ground. If anyone so much as thinks about taking that pardon, I'll see you thrown into the warp bubble with a full spacesuit, so you feel your atoms coming apart one by one, the experienced pilot growled. Now let's get back to killing this whore. Gunnery, give me a shot. Any shot. Just shoot the bitch. Yes, sir, the bridge crew called back. A good mix of enthusiasm and fear that kept the little cunts in line. He was going to find a way to fucking hang Rochelle for this. In the ancient time of Queens, ships on the Occident's ocean had fought with rolling cannon broadside, or dueling artillery cannons mounted fore and aft, dancing between the waves and ducking in and out of storms as sails of cloth snapped overhead, and ladies of brass commanded their guns. Now, the waves and storms and even the sails had left, but the idea of that rolling fight of dueling position remained. Light jousting were schools of fish ripping each other apart at maximum speed, but in this slower realm, the one where merchantmen, pirates, and those who defended the former from the latter ply their trade, one could open up Great Admiral Batishi Geserias's treatise on the proper application of naval positioning, and win a modern battle using only its advice. It mattered not that the weapons were no longer Ovid cannon shells, but instead hyperactive beams of concentrated light. It mattered not that the storms one faced were iron and solar, instead of rain and wind. It mattered not that sails no longer snapped overhead, and propellers were long since confined to civilian work, to be on a naval vessel slugging it out with a foe. The rules remained the same. Weapons were still fired in broadside volleys or pinpoint spinal attacks. Marines still carried carbines and bayonets for boardings, and officers still practiced sword drills. Tradition was a hell of a thing, And, in some ways, what was old was new again, in this modern age of war. The Into Harm's Way rolled as the enemy fired a staggered broadside of laser blasts into its frame, using the armoured hangar bays on each side of its engineering compartment as ablative armour, before a quick thruster burn lined up a spinal shot that sliced through armour and internal structure, causing a burst of vaporized metal and ablative composite to cloud the viewports of the sensors for the split second needed to allow an interceptor to dive low, cutting a bloody swath across the pirate cruiser's deck with magnetic-shaped charges. Flight Lead Taffin glanced back at the expanding detonations appearing on the cruiser from her strafing run, her backseater, Senwin, having released the munitions at the perfect time. Clear run, her wife called forward. New net point set. Begin to pull away to avoid fire. Cycle through. Taffin slammed the interceptor into a steep climb as she rotated it around to present the armoured bottom to any potential return fire. Are we heading back to the carrier? Readout says we're bingo on munitions except for the big one. Senwin paused. No, she says to maintain pressure, any way we can, along with sealed contingency orders? Senwin could see it took Taffin every scrap of discipline to not look back in shock as the idea of contingency orders were relayed. Normally those were only given out before the battle, or when a commander had reason to believe they would be unable to give commands. Normally, the second situation involved the command ship being destroyed. Well, Taffin muttered to herself, pulling out of the dive to try and stitch a band of laser fire across the cruiser's fore and starboard armoured sensor bulge, before the cloud of atomized metal ceased giving them cover from the still semi-intact point defense lasers. Deeps! We've rolled worse dice. Venture's forth into Great Unknown sat tensely in her crash couch, plugged into every single system and watching them all flicker with every consecutive shot, caught by the patrol carrier's armour. Already, decks 3 and 4 had hull breaches and power outages that needed to be dealt with, and the port and up lifeboats were locked in place as a higher-powered beam during the initial exchange of fire welded their hatches shut. The intentions were clear with that carefully aimed blast. There would be no prisoners taken. She almost flinched as the cyber proprioception of the ship's damage control sensors fled another warning as a high-powered blast burrowed deep into the ship's hull, frying the No. 7 cargo bay, thankfully emptied of its explosives, but stopping at the secondary armor plating. To be plugged into a system like the Into Harm's Way was to feel the very spirit and soul of the ship in one's very soul. To stand in an acid storm and have every lie and falsehood scoured away in the sheer glory of the perfect system. And at the moment, Venture's Force's system was under attack. Weapons fire scoured her ship clean. Missiles detonated meters from her very skin, the crew running around inside her pumped blood and circulated oxygen. She was the ship. The ship was her. A hit. A bad one. They would not die. Power flickered, faded. Not today. The main engine shut off. The Pirate King marched his forces through boarding umbilicals into deep pressurized hull segments. They carried scatterguns, oxygen eaters, laser rifles, and stun prods. He laughed as his girls kicked aside a half-melted corpse. Poor bitch of a crewwoman had been in this section of the ship when it had been disabled, fried in an instant and sliced in half by capital-grade weaponry. Shame it was over in an instant. He called out to his merry band of pirates stalking into the deathly silent ship. The light was a battle station red. Boarding red, the pirates claimed. A good omen for their victory. Red like the pyres that would take away dishonored dead. Every pirate could hear their heartbeat as their pressure suits contained that noise and no other. Exposed to hard vacuum, there was nothing to hear in this space. Void swallowed all noise like a greedy Rakiri. The king flashed his stun prod forward, gesturing towards a bulkhead indicating pressure. "Bring up the cutting torches!" he called over typeband radio. "We've got bitches to fuck!" It had been a while since he raided and boarded a patrol carrier, but he knew his way around it even still. They were easy prey, these lone protectors of shipping lanes. More and more pirates began to pour over the umbilicals, pods, squads, dozens and more, all trying to fill the cramped spaces in the breached hallway. It was a rumble at first, the faint shifting of something powerful deep in the core of the ship. The engine. The engine wasn't dead. Yellowteeth barely had time to react before a full burn from a cold engine nearly threw him from his feet, docking umbilicals strained, trying to hold the two ships together before failing and snapping. The airlock slid open, atmosphere rushing through the voided deck, explosive decompression shattering faceplates and throwing pirates into each other, or out into the void between stars. The canned bomb of air finally abated, and Captain Yellowteeth looked back at his now much weaker boarding party, watching as women floated limp from snapped spines and shattered void suits, watching as women without either equipment flailed and tried in vain to swim back to his ship as they were sent further and further into the stars. Watched as hidden doors slid open, silent figures in full marine kit stepped out. A single figure wearing a brass chestplate, gleaming in the shine of distant stars, bearing a saber and pistol. A pirate in the rear barely had time to notice the flash of steel before an overbuilt saber guard shattered her pressure suit's faceplate, ripping the ice from her head and breath from her lungs as the void claimed another daughter for her share. Captain Rochelle brought her blade down in signal, and the two pods of marines flanking her on either side opened up into the stunned mass on full auto.